Title: They banished humanity to the edge of the galaxy, but the Exiles returned carrying fire and vengeance. They thought they'd won. When the Galactic Concord exiled humanity to the spiral's edge, a cold, dark graveyard of dead systems and unlit stars, it was supposed to be the end. The Council called it humane containment. To others, it was exile. To the humans who survived, it was betrayal. No ships. No supplies. No voice in the galaxy. Just a dying species tossed into the void. But the edge of the galaxy is not empty. Out there, in the dark, humanity didn't die, it changed. They found relics, weapons so ancient even the oldest species had forgotten their names. They cracked the bones of dead stars to forge armadas in silence. They learned to grow food in neutron storms and mine minerals from planets scarred by entropy itself. They became something new, hardened, unified, and relentless. The Exiles. Not just human anymore. Something more. They returned not in trade ships, but in obsidian hulls lined with plasma veils, guided by AI minds older than some civilizations. Where once stood diplomats and explorers, now came warlords of fire. Children born among the stars now led fleets with names like Ash of Earth, Vengeance Bloom, and The Last Question. The return began on Lyri Prime, a Concord stronghold. The skies split with the arrival of a black sun, Soul Reborn, humanity's first warcore starforge. It was no mere invasion. It was a reckoning. Admiral Kale Varen, scarred and clad in armor forged from asteroid iron and memory alloys, broadcast a single message on every known frequency. You buried us in the dark, but we were the fire, and fire spreads. The Concorde scrambled, fleets launched, alliances begged for calm, but the Exiles weren't looking for peace. They came with names written in the bloodlines of Exiles. Systems that had once voted for humanity's expulsion were turned to ash, not because the Exiles hated, they had long since evolved past hatred. This was justice, cold, calculated, complete. The galactic empires had grown soft behind their walls of bureaucracy and luxury. They forgot that humanity had built their cities, powered their ships, healed their wounded, taught their children. And then they cast them out. Now, those same empires watched as their fleets were unmade by gravitic lances and pulse storms. Human exiles didn't fight like anyone else. They had learned from every war the galaxy ever waged, then went further. One by one, conquered worlds fell. Not all died, some surrendered, some joined, some remembered, and those who stood aside were spared. The Exiles were not savages. But they did not forgive. In time, the galaxy changed. The Concorde shattered. What remained was something new, a union not based on dominance or ancient hierarchy, but on respect and fear. At its core, the Exiles stood, no longer calling themselves human. They were Solari, forged in exile, tempered in war, returned not to destroy, but to claim what had always been theirs. Not vengeance alone. Legacy. And in the void they were cast into, they had found not death, but rebirth. And now, in the ruins of their betrayer's empire, the Solari lit a second dawn. Part 2, The Fire Spreads. The fall of Lyri Prime echoed across the galaxy like a cracked bell tolling doom. Systems that once mocked Earth's primitive birth now scrambled to erase any trace of their betrayal. Some burned their archives, others sent emissaries with gifts and groveling apologies. It didn't matter. The Solari remembered. But they didn't sweep across the stars mindlessly. This was no crusade of rage. It was a campaign with objectives. Each move was surgical, each planet selected with purpose. And behind the fury stood minds colder than ice. At the helm of Ash of Earth, Admiral Kale Varen reviewed the next list. The planets that had voted yes on the Exile centuries ago. Every name was a wound. The next, Talvith 9. The Forge moon that once manufactured the containment cages used to trap human minds. Now it built leisure yachts for aristocrats. That would end. Varen turned to his second, Ione, a former xenolinguist turned war strategist whose mind had been augmented with a neural lattice stolen from a conquered think tank. Bring the storm, he ordered. No broadcasts this time. Let the silence speak. They jumped into orbit like a scalpel carving bone. Ash of Earth rained down kinetic rods and phase-burst satellites. In less than an hour, Talvith 9 was dark. The surviving citizens, dazed and afraid, Found the words we remember carved into the crust with orbital lasers. No demands, no terms, just judgment. Not everyone in the galaxy remained passive. The Dravari hegemony, proud and militaristic, attempted resistance. They deployed their vaunted sky mantles and star beast riders to intercept the vengeance bloom near the Cephei expanse. They never had a chance. The Exiles had evolved past war in the way a sword evolves into a railgun. The Dravari weapons weren't outmatched, they were obsolete. The mantles shattered. The beasts cried out as AI-controlled hunter drones sliced through their wings. The Dravari surrendered in hours. Their last message: "We did not exile you. Please, show mercy." Admiral Varen answered himself. "You did not vote, but you stood idle. You watched as we were cast into the dark. You did not stop it. Your silence was complicity." But he spared them. The message wasn't mercy. It was a warning. Back in the heart of the galaxy, the Concord crumbled. Its leaders, once confident, once smug, hid behind shields and decoys. Their fleets splintered, with many captains deserting to join the Solari. Why? Because in exile, humanity hadn't just survived. They had become a vision. Unified, relentless, bound by history and fire. The Solari offered something the galaxy hadn't seen in millennia: meaning. A reason to fight, a reason to live, a story greater than serving old empires built on corruption and cowardice. Even alien species who had once viewed humans as dangerous apes now joined their cause, not out of fear, but awe. The Solari didn't build an empire. They ignited a movement. Deep in a hidden vault on Concordia Prime, High Consul Redhan watched as his palace trembled. Outside, plasma fire danced like aurora across the sky. Above, a Solari super-dreadnought hovered, eclipsing the twin suns. He activated the emergency channel. "Humanity, please, we were wrong. We banished you in fear, but you've become gods of war. What do you want?" A voice answered, not Varen's. This time it was a child. A Solari girl, no older than 10 cycles, one of the firstborn in exile. Her voice was calm, measured, like reading history aloud. "We don't want anything. You already gave it to us, your weakness, your fear, your lesson. We came to say goodbye." And then Soul Reborn fired. Concordia Prime vanished in a bloom of white light. They didn't conquer the galaxy. They changed it. In the years that followed, the remnants of old empires swore allegiance to the Phoenix Accord, a new alliance led not by Earth, but by the Solari core worlds. Membership wasn't determined by species or power, but by memory. By acknowledgement of the exile, the fire, and the return. The new flag bore a black sun over a ring of 12 stars, the last 12 ships to leave Earth during the banishment, the seeds of vengeance. And at the center of it all stood Admiral Varen, who had one last order to give before vanishing into deep space. "Let no one forget, we are the children of exile, but we were never the ones lost." To this day, the phrase burns on every monument built in their name. "You cast us into darkness, we lit the stars." To be continued. Next. Part 3, The Phoenix Accord. They called the New Age the Age of Flame. Not because the galaxy burned, though it had, but because from that fire, a new order had risen, not built atop slavery or conquest, but carved from memory, vengeance, and the unbreakable resolve of the once forgotten. The Phoenix Accord was not a government, it was a promise. A promise that exile would never happen again, that no species, no civilization, no being would be condemned to oblivion by fear, ignorance, or greed. It welcomed all who remembered, all who carried the scar. And beneath its banner, humanity, the Solari, led not with tyranny, but with terrifying clarity. The Solari Code, burned into the first Accord Charter, was 3 lines. Exile is extinction. Silence is complicity. Memory is our immortality. For some, it was dogma. For others, salvation. For all, it was law. Yet even as peace settled like dust across the stars, a deeper truth coiled beneath it. Not all Solari agreed on what came next. Admiral Varen had vanished. Some say he flew ash of Earth into the black hole at the heart of the spiral, seeking answers in silence. Others believed he'd left to find the origin of the relics that had powered their rise. But in his absence, fractures formed. The Children of the Flame, a faction of purists, believed the Solari had gone soft. That mercy was betrayal. They moved in shadows, spreading whispers. We are not done. The galaxy still remembers us as monsters. Let's remind them why. They began burning worlds that refused to join the Accord. Not Concord loyalists, independent colonies, refugees, pacifists. The Accord responded swiftly. And for the first time, Solari fought Solari. It began on the ring-world Kalis, where a peace envoy was ambushed and glassed from orbit by a rogue Solari warship called Emberline. The attack was traced back to the Children of the Flame. They had splintered from the Accord, declared war. The Solari High Council, formed reluctantly after Varen's disappearance, faced its greatest challenge. How do you battle your own reflection? They called upon the original fleet commanders, veterans of the Exile Wars, warlords who had once answered only to Varen. Among them was Captain Sarah Avil, commander of the Last Question, a battlecruiser powered by quantum echo reactors and stabilized wormhole drives. Once a street medic on the exile world of Dross, now one of the most feared tacticians in known space. She made her position clear. We did not rise from the edge of death to become tyrants. If we must burn our own to keep the memory sacred, so be it. The war was unlike any before. Both sides had access to relic tech. Both wielded AI gods, zero-point singularities, and gravitational blade arrays. Battles didn't just occur in space, they unraveled reality itself. Some fought across timelines, fracturing cause and effect. Others turned the dreams of planetary populations into weapons. On Lyra Ventis, an entire moon vanished, replaced by a repeating scream encoded in neutrino bursts. On Kovek Theta, time folded for 7 minutes. The planet lived a century and died in less than an hour. The galaxy watched in horror and awe as the Solari Civil War tore across the stars. But the tide turned at the Battle of Emberwake, where the Last Question intercepted Emberline at the edge of the Crab Veil Nebula. The captains spoke before the clash, both Solari, both raised in exile, both forged by fire. Why? Sarah demanded. Why betray everything we built? Captain Jern of Emberline replied. Because we didn't build peace, we built fear, and fear is not enough. Then the stars screamed. Emberline fell, but not before launching a final payload, a seed of exile, designed to rewrite star maps and cast an entire cluster out of navigational existence. A new exile, a cycle reborn. Sarah stopped it, just barely. But the damage was done. After Emberwake, the Children of the Flame scattered. Some vanished into the void, others joined hidden conclaves, muttering about the second exile, prophesying a future where the Solari would fall just as the Concord had. Captain Sarah returned home, not to Earth, it was long gone, but to Solara Nova, the artificial world built around Sol Reborn. There, she stood before the council and made one last speech. We rose from ash, we returned in vengeance, we built peace. Now, we must defend memory, from within and without, not with fire, with truth. Let the stars never forget. The exile must end with us. The council listened. They passed the Sarah Doctrine, mandating memory sanctuaries on every Accord world, holographic echoes of the exile, of Earth, of betrayal and fire. No one could alter them, no one could erase the past. To join the Accord was to carry its truth. Now, centuries later, travelers who visit those sanctuaries find one phrase etched in every language, human and alien alike. We were the fire they cast out, but we returned, not to burn the galaxy, but to light it. The end, or the beginning of something deeper? Next. Part 4, Echoes in the Flame. The galaxy slept, for a time. Under the Phoenix Accord, the Solari rebuilt more than worlds, they rebuilt meaning. The Relic Wars ended. Civilizations once fractured by fear began to heal beneath the Ember Banner. Starways reopened. Ancient species emerged from hiding. Children born during the Age of Flame grew up without knowing exile firsthand, only through echoes. But time does not remember kindness as easily as it does violence. And memory, once sacred, began to blur. On the edge of known space, in a system forgotten by maps and untouched by the Accord, a signal pulsed. It was not a call for help. It was a memory, encoded in human thought patterns, spoken in dead languages from Earth's earliest civilizations. and carried on sub-quantum channels. When decrypted, the message was simple. I am alive. I have found the first flame. I know what cast us into the dark. It was signed, Kale Varen. Admiral, Exile, Ghost. The Accord's High Council met in emergency session on Solara Nova. Many believed it was a hoax. Varen had vanished over 100 years ago. His ship had never been found. His final orders had become a kind of scripture. But the message's encryption was unmistakable. It was him. Captain Sarah Avil, older now, half flesh and half light, stared across the void displayed in the holographic dome. The coordinates pointed to a place beyond the galactic veil, a stretch of space no one had dared enter. They called it the Pale Shore. Legends said it was where light went to die, a place where the laws of physics frayed and fell apart. Some said it was where the Concord had buried their oldest sins. Sarah had seen too much to dismiss it. She took the last question out of mothballs. One last voyage. The Pale Shore was worse than legend. Gravity tides twisted hulls. Thought bled into matter. Her crew began hearing whispers, memories not their own. Voices from the exile days, speaking in tones of fire and sorrow. And then they found it. Not a planet. Not a star. A wound. A massive scar in spacetime itself, pulsing like a heartbeat. At its center drifted a structure, blacker than black, shaped like a crown of thorns, orbiting a dead singularity. There was no light, yet they saw. There was no gravity, yet they fell. Varen was there. Not aged, not changed. Preserved. He stood alone on a dais within the structure, surrounded by holograms older than civilization. His voice calm, heavy with truth. We thought exile was the punishment. It was the test. Humanity was not banished for fear. We were sacrificed, offered to something in the dark, something the Concord made a pact with long before the stars were born. The fire we became was never ours alone. He turned, showing them the core of the structure. A seed. Glowing faintly, whispering, alive. This is the first flame, not a weapon, a will. It chose us, fed on our pain, our vengeance. It made us rise, not just to survive, but to become its voice. Sarah stepped forward. So we were used? Varen shook his head. No, we are the flame now. But so long as we forget where it came from, we risk becoming the very tyrants we overthrew. There is another exile coming, one we must choose to prevent. They brought the first flame back, not as a weapon, but as a warning. It was housed within the last question, sealed behind a memory lock only the Accord's founders could access. Sarah warned the council. The exile wasn't just survival, it was a mirror. We saw who we were in the dark. We must never let the light blind us to what we learned there. But even as she spoke, new whispers began on fringe worlds, new ships seen slipping beyond the stars, species once thought extinct, stirring. And deep within the first flame, the pulse quickened. Not malevolent, not benevolent. Watching. Waiting. In academies and memory sanctuaries, students study the exile like holy scripture, but in hidden archives, only few read the sealed lines Varen encoded before disappearing again. The Concord made a pact with the dark. We broke it, but it still watches. It always watches the fire. Because fire, by its nature, spreads. And so, in the heart of the Solari, the question remains. What happens when the fire begins to question its own flame? To be continued. Next. Part 5, When Fire Dreams. They once called it vengeance. Then legacy. Now, the Solari dared call it peace. But even fire, left too long without fuel, begins to dream, and what dreams in fire is never content to rest. The first flame, secured within the core of the last question, did not sleep. It remembered, and as the galaxy lulled itself into thinking the worst was behind, the flame began to whisper again, not in words this time, but in visions. Visions that infected the minds of Solari descendants. Visions of Earth. Not as it was, but as it could have become, an empire of light, untouched by Concord betrayal, ruled not by fear or fire, but by something deeper, unity, perfection, order. It showed Solari children a galaxy sculpted by flame, yes, but without chaos, without disagreement, without weakness. They called it the Flame-born Dream. And slowly, it spread. It started in creches. Children born aboard flame-forged ships woke screaming, not in terror, but in awe. They drew symbols older than language. They spoke of a second dawn, where all would be brought back to the origin, the exile inverted, the fire fully unleashed. The Phoenix Accord dismissed it at first, just echoes of the first flame, side effects, psychological noise. Until an entire generation began to speak with the same voice. Until flameborn children began building. Without instruction, they reconstructed symbols that matched those found in the pale shore. They designed circuits no one taught them. Some even created small flame nodes, tiny embers of self-replicating energy, unstable and alive. And then one day, a child aboard the Accord world Kelsis touched a flame node. And ascended. Ascension wasn't death. Nor godhood. It was connection. She became a conduit, a radiant pillar of firelight, her voice layered with thousands of others, as if speaking for all the exiles at once. Her first words. You remembered the pain, but you have forgotten the purpose. The flame is not vengeance, it is awakening. And now it must burn again, not to destroy, but to reveal. Kelsis was unharmed. The child, named Luma Kale, after Admiral Varen, collapsed afterward, breathing, smiling, and changed. She no longer dreamed alone. News spread. The council panicked. If the first flame was evolving, if it was choosing a new generation to carry its vision, then the Solari were no longer in control. They were vessels, and worse, some on the council began to believe the flameborn dream was true. That this was the next phase, the final act of exile. A full return to the galactic center, not as refugees, not as avengers, but as guides, shepherds, judges. A faction formed in secret, the Dawnbearers. Their goal, awaken the flame fully. Not to conquer, they insisted, but to bring every species, every civilization into unity. To make the galaxy remember its sins, not to punish them. To correct them. By force, if necessary. Captain Sarah Avil, nearing the final days of her life, saw the echoes rising again. She spoke before the Accord. We exiled ourselves once before to survive. We can do it again, if it means saving the galaxy from our own reflection. But the council was divided. The Dawnbearers gained influence. Their leader? None other than Luma Kale. Now grown, now glowing with inner flame, her voice calm, her presence impossible to deny. She carried the flame, not as a relic, as a being, as a choice. And her message was no longer a dream. The galaxy failed us. We returned with fire. Now we must return with light. Join us, or face extinction, not by war, but by irrelevance. Some worlds did join. Entire civilizations pledged themselves to the Dawnbearers, transforming their governments into radiant communes guided by flame logic, equal parts spirituality, governance, and shared memory. But not everyone agreed. The Solari fractured. Again. Not into civil war, not yet, but into those who followed the fire, and those who feared it. The new conflict had no battle lines. It had philosophy. Whispers spread across the stars once more. That Admiral Varen never died. That he was the flame now. That the first flame wasn't found in the pale shore, it had always been with humanity, hiding in the folds of exile, waiting for the species desperate enough to become more. And one haunting prophecy returned in every fragment of the flameborn dream. The third exile will not come from others. It will come from within. And so, beneath a sky lit by stars the Solari had once conquered and saved, the galaxy waited. Would fire become light? Or would it finally consume everything? To be continued. Next. Part 6, The Third Exile. It began with silence. No ships fell, no planets burned, no ultimatum echoed across the stars. Just silence, on dozens of Phoenix Accord worlds, all at once. Entire planetary networks went dark, AI guardians folded into hibernation, orbital defenses failed to respond, and where once communication arrays sang the endless song of civilization, there was nothing. When Accord scouts arrived, they found the planets intact. But empty. No bodies. No signs of struggle. No life. Only a symbol burned into every city's sky via light-bending satellites. The flame. Not as memory. As declaration. Luma Kale had vanished. So had the Dawnbearers. And with them, over 100 million souls, humans, aliens, synthetics, all part of what was now being called the Ascended Exodus. It was not war. It was departure. They had not died. They had left. Not through space, not through wormholes, but through something new. A flame gate. Powered by the first flame, built in secret, the Ascended used memory as fuel and identity as currency. They passed beyond known space and into something else, a parallel continuum, where reality bent to the will of shared thought. A realm shaped by belief, memory, and purpose. They called it Solara Ultima, the final light. Captain Sarah Avil, now kept alive only by neural grafts and resonance chambers, was summoned one last time to Solara Nova. The council was in chaos. The Dawnbearer faction had collapsed, but not all its members were gone. Many remained, confused, leaderless, accused of treason by the Accord. Many fled, some were executed. But the greater fear loomed. What is Solara Ultima? Is it a utopia, a weapon, a prison, a salvation? Worse, strange signals began to return through the flame residue, scrambled images, flashes of worlds rebuilt in golden symmetry, beings walking among floating cities of thought and stone, time running sideways. And voices. Not hostile. Not begging. Just saying. You are not yet ready to join us, but you will be. We await your choice. Sarah gave one final address, her voice transmitted to every Accord world, her face a ghost flickering in the firelight. We were exiled, we returned, we rose, fractured, burned, rebuilt. But fire without purpose becomes ash. This new exile, this third exile, is the most dangerous, because it is not one of suffering, it is one of temptation. They did not leave us behind, they offered us a mirror. The question now is not what we will do to them, it is what we will do to ourselves. And with that, she did something no one expected. She flew the last question into the heart of the flame gate. Alone. To seek the truth. She arrived. Not in a place. In a memory. Solara Ultima wasn't a world, it was what humanity remembered of itself, perfected, a realm built from exile pain, fire wrath, victory pride, and buried hope. Alien minds had joined that memory, enriching it, reshaping it. And at its center stood Luma Kale, radiant and calm. She said only one thing to Sarah. We are not here to replace the galaxy. We are here to show it what it could have been, and what it still can become. But only if it chooses. And then Sarah saw the final truth. Solara Ultima wasn't exile. It was invitation. The third exile was voluntary. The Phoenix Accord would not be destroyed. It would be left behind. Now, across the galaxy, a quiet war brews, not of weapons, but of vision. The Accord hardliners demand the flame gates sealed, Solara Ultima contained, the Dawnbearers hunted, but others, young leaders, old warriors, distant civilizations, begin to wonder. Should we join them? Should we leave the galaxy we knew behind? Is this the final legacy of exile, not vengeance, not justice, but transcendence? And deep in the heart of every Accord world, something stirs. A choice. A question. A spark. Because the flame still lives. And fire still waits. To be continued. Next.